Welcome to the latest live stream. Rob Staton with Matt Mikolas here tonight, and we're going to get into the big Seahawks topics. We're going to talk about everything that needs to be talked about with regards to the Seahawks. You can see that we're both in the festive spirit as well. It is the 11th
holiday
of December.
season. Absolutely. Look at that.
December in the UK. It's still the 10th in Seattle, so we're doing a bit of time traveling as well.
Great.
Matt, how are you? How are you feeling?
Good. How are things in the future?
I can tell you that we're a lot brighter in the 11th of December right now.
Oh, good. Because it's a little bleak on the 10th. But no, things are good. All things considered.
Well, let's talk about whether things are bleak or not for the Seahawks then. Yeah. That's a nice segue. And just a reminder to anybody, if you want to super chat, go ahead. We will jump to those straight away. If you have a question, you want to super chat it in. We may well get through some questions, some Q&As anyway in this stream that we're going to do. But Matt, let's just the very basic first question. How are you feeling about the Seahawks right now as we sit here today?
Well, they're taking on a lot of water and and trying to bail out. So they're obviously at a crossroads right now, and we're just talking like long-term overall franchise status. Yeah, they're at a bit of a crossroads right now, and it's going to be their most tumultuous offseason probably they've had in more than a decade, because I mean, in my heart of hearts, I think they're going to lose one of their either head coach or quarterback. So that's where it's headed. But the funny thing is, and look, it's the holiday season. It's the season of hope, right? And it's funny because I'm holding out just a small sliver of a glimmer of hope that, because look, okay, so since the NFL decided to add 7 teams to each conference playoffs, which I thought was a horrible decision. I thought it would really just kind of makes everything murkier. But they did that. So, a team like Seattle right now with 5 weeks to go isn't technically out of it. And I'm holding on to that small sliver of hope. I'm looking at the game Russell Wilson played against the 49ers on Sunday. And it's not a lot. I'm not putting a lot of my headspace into this, but I'm looking at a schedule that features the Texans, the Bears, and the Lions upcoming, and a Rams team that you don't know which Rams team is going to show up week in and week out. So, look, I don't think they're going to run the table by any means, but is it possible? Enough that I sit up at night thinking about it. So there's 2 different conversations to have this season, and the small possibility that they could salvage it and make a run at the playoffs, and what does that even mean really once they get there? But then the bigger picture in the organization, and the likelihood that they finish probably, I mean, we're looking at 7-10, something like that, miss the playoffs, and now it's the big picture questions in the organization.
It's interesting to mention the schedule as well, because the Cardinals game and the last game of the regular season, who knows where the Cardinals are going to be? If they've already tied up the first round bye, what kind of a Cardinals team are you going to play? And if you are going there and there's nothing at stake for Arizona and there's everything at stake for Seattle, then that is not as daunting as it would be, let's say, playing the Cardinals this weekend. So it changes the complexion, and they're not going to risk Nuke Hopkins and Kyler Murray if they don't have to, given the way that they've played. So it really does put a lot of emphasis on that Rams game, because I'm with you. I think the Seahawks are going to win this weekend. Yeah. I think they should beat the Lions and Bears, especially if Russell Wilson is anything like Russell Wilson at his best, which hopefully he's reaching, which means that it's the Rams, the Seahawks. The thing that gives me no confidence, though, Matt, that this is going to be a season is that it's the Rams. And now you never know what you're going to get from the Rams unless they're playing the Seahawks.
Yeah,
what usually that means is they get a win when they play the Seahawks. That's the only problem.
Which is 100% true. So, I mean, there's definitely that's the most daunting task there is out there. Plus, I mean, even if the Cardinals have nothing to play for and they play their backups, I mean, you saw what their backup quarterback did to the Seahawks just this year up in Seattle. So, but weird things happen in the desert. But no, you're absolutely right. Look, the Rams are the Seahawks kryptonite no matter what's going on. So, but I mean, at first we have to worry about a Houston team that's, they've just assigned Davis Mills as their quarterback. I don't see that being an issue. And I think that it's so easy to dismiss, as I've done, as we've all done, the Seahawks team based on what they've put together so far this year. But you look at the circumstances within, you look at Russell Wilson looking healthy now, and a defense that I think that, the latter half of what we've seen so far has played a lot better than in the first half. You close your eyes and you see a team that can certainly handle those lesser than teams, the Bears, the Lions, and the Texans. I don't know that they could beat the Rams, but the Rams, who knows what team shows up on any given Sunday. So there's that. That's where I'm at. That's my headspace.
I think the good thing, Matt, is it's just to have that little bit of hope. It is, even if it's just tiny, as this clearly is, but it's better to watch a Seahawks game thinking, what if? And watch a Seahawks game thinking, if I have one too many beers during this game, it doesn't matter because it's an irrelevant game.
Well, they're going to make me drink one too many beers during the game either way, whether it's because of the hope or because of their play. But I say this, it's the holiday season, okay? And if that lawyer was able to prove that Kris Kringle was indeed Santa Claus legally, then you know what? It doesn't have to be on 34th Street. We got to have a miracle right here in the Emerald City, okay?
So, let's talk about the big. I think it's the big topic. It's the one that as soon as the playoff hope has faded, it's going to dominate Seattle sports, and it's what happens with Russell Wilson. Now, the rumors have started early.
Of course,
there was the report this week, and then Russell Wilson was asked about it, and I think that the answer that Wilson gave was reported a certain way, which is, "I want to be here for 20 years. There's no truth in that," and it was almost emphatic. And then I watched that press conference for the first time today, and I thought Wilson kind of left the door open a little more than some of those quotes suggest. He was like, "Well, I hope I'm going to be here for 20 years, and we'll see. I mean, we never know, but I mean, I'd like to." And that was kind of the answer with that. So let's say that the Seahawks don't make the playoffs. They don't have that miracle on 34th Street moment here, and they don't make the playoffs.
Right?
Is it inevitable that he's going to go? That he's going to want to go somewhere else? Or do you see Jody Allen or whoever's in charge of making the big decisions going, we're going to move on from Pete and potentially John Schneider, and Russell Wilson is going to be the guy that we fall behind?
It's hard to see because this is 1 year and a year where Russell Wilson was injured for a portion of the season. And that's where the team really fell apart. And I'm talking about hard to see Jody Allen firing Pete Carroll. As much as a lot of us would probably want it to happen. And I don't think it's a Jody Allen isn't tied in. Jody Allen is too far away from it. I think Jody Allen cares an awful lot about what happens with both this franchise and the Portland Trailblazers. And you see kind of what's happening down in Portland. If you're following that at all, they've just gone through an investigation, fired the general manager, Neil O'Shea there. And you could say what you want about how involved Burt Coles is and how involved the Vulcans are, but it's Jody Allen. It's Jody Allen who's asking the questions, and it's ultimately her decision. So I think a couple things. I think first of all, I think what I thought coming into the season, which was if it was a disaster of a season, or if Russell Wilson wasn't seeing significant improvement toward the franchise's chances of winning a Super Bowl in the near future, that Russell Wilson was going to be asking for a trade. And I still feel that way unless the direction of the franchise drastically changes, which would mean a change at the head coaching job in Pete Carroll. And then Russell Wilson, I'm assuming, would want some kind of say in what kind of head coach was brought in to replace Pete Carroll. I think one or the other is going to be gone this season. I fear it's going to be Russell Wilson. But then there's another aspect that plays into that too, and that's the way Russell Wilson has played thus far. And if his play doesn't improve, how much are you able to get in a trade for Russell Wilson? That becomes the big question too, because last season, with the Chicago Bears, you had draft picks and players and things like that. Russell Wilson was probably the most tradable at the highest value last offseason. I don't think he necessarily has that value this year because of where the team is and where his play has been. So that kind of factors into everything too.
I think his play certainly plays into it. I just wonder though, Matt, because I've looked at the quarterbacks in this upcoming draft because we've had to, because one of them might be playing in Seattle next year for all we know. But I've looked at it, and the difference between this year and last year is a Chicago team could say, that's our best offer, take it or leave it. and then they could go into the draft and make a bold move to get Justin Fields.
Mhm.
Nobody is going to be paying multiple first-round picks to get a Kenny Pickett or a Carson Strong or a Matt Corral in this upcoming draft. So I think that the market for the veteran quarterbacks, and bear in mind that Carson Wentz has ended up costing the Colts a first-round pick, and that's Wentz with his issues and his injuries and his complete loss of form.
Sure.
If he's worth a first, then I think even if Russell Wilson's play is kind of average for his standards between now and the end of the season, that somebody somewhere, an owner or a GM, will convince themselves that actually all he needs is a fresh start, and that they will be able to say to their fans, and I think that John Mara in New York is a good example of this. This is a guy who's under immense pressure. The fans are booing him when Strahan's having his jersey retired, for crying out loud, and Eli. Those celebrations are being drowned out because the owner's on the field and he's getting booed. He needs to be able to turn around to a fan base and go, I've delivered this for you, and this is the direction we're going in. And even the name value of a Wilson, a Rodgers, a Deshaun Watson is going to make those players particularly valuable this year. I think that's what will keep his value. I'm not sure it'll be the kind of blow your socks off kind of deal that maybe it would have been a year or two ago, or even in 2018, when you may have got the first and the fourth overall pick from Cleveland. But certainly I think there'll be an offer that if the Seahawks decide to move on, they will find some value in.
I have a hard time comparing value with other deals that have been made in other years and things like that because, I'm getting ahead of myself here in the conversation because I'm sure it's going to come up, the Jamal Adams thing. But I mean, you look at Minkah Fitzpatrick, who went for a first-round pick, versus Jamal Adams, who went for 2 firsts, a third, and Bradley McDougald, and he brought a fourth back. So it's just everything just kind of depends on a team's desperation level and just what's going on at the time. There are so many factors that go into what value a player ends up bringing back in a trade. I think Russell Wilson's trade value has diminished from what it was last offseason. And so maybe you get somebody like New York desperate, or maybe Sean Payton really doesn't like the direction the Saints have gone this year. Maybe Taysom Hill isn't the quarterback that I guess he thought he was when they gave him that contract, and Taysom Hill's had every chance to prove that he is, and he's proving that, I mean, he's Tim Tebow, except, a worse passer of the football than Tim Tebow is, and with as bad a passer the football as Tim Tebow was, that's quite an indictment. So maybe, I think that if there's a team, those are probably the two teams, the Giants, if they're ready to give up on Daniel Jones, and the Saints, and then it's what are they willing to give up. So, and I don't know. I mean, it has to be teams, obviously, that Russell's willing to go to as well. So there's all that factors in.
I have a lot of crazy thoughts, Matt, and I write about them, and people tell me how crazy they are quite often. There is one in particular that I want to sort of bring to the table. And look, I can anticipate what you're going to say.
Okay.
Because I think most people have said this.
All right.
I'm going to try.
But I'm somebody, I entertain crazy thoughts. I put out crazy thoughts as well.
You might like this then.
I might be good with it.
You'll like it. You'll probably just say that there's no chance. So, and I wrote about this a few days ago. A report came out. It wasn't a report. It was an article on Pro Football Talk that just touched on the possibility that as the Saints' season is collapsing, that they might actually find it quite challenging to bring in a veteran quarterback in the offseason. And for that reason, their head coach might go to where there already is one. And my initial thought of that was, well, that's interesting. I want to think about this. And then I had a look over the years. And we're only a few years removed, I think it was 2017, where the Rams made a public pitch to get Sean Payton before they appointed Sean McVay. And both parties talked about it, that they'd had a conversation about this, that there'd been realistic talks about a trade for Payton. Same thing happened with Indianapolis before they appointed Frank Reich. Colts approached New Orleans about it. Mickey Loomis, the GM in New Orleans, said he was open to a trade. And they talked about the possibility of Payton moving on. He's also been linked with the Cowboys over the years when they've moved on from initially not Jason Garrett. It was Bill Parsons. No, it wasn't Wade Phillips. I'm getting my old coaches mixed up. Wade Phillips.
There's been a lot of them in Dallas.
In Dallas. So he's been close to being on the out a few times.
Okay.
And if the Saints do not have the ability to challenge the New Yorks and the Philadelphias and the Denvers, for example, in terms of draft stock, and they don't have much draft stock, maybe Peyton and the Saints will go, it's time for a change. And in a scenario where maybe Pete Carroll, I don't think he'll get fired either, by the way. I think that if he goes, it's because he will say, we're on the brink of a massive rebuild here, and I'm not the man to do it, which I think he contemplated at the end of the 2017 season. But if in a situation where Carroll moves on, I can't think of anything more Paul Allen-esque than going and landing somebody like Sean Payton. And if Jody Allen's thinking, what would Paul do? Maybe, just maybe, there is a deal to be done there to unite Wilson with Payton, not in New Orleans, but maybe in Seattle. Who knows?
I think that would be awesome. You're right. I don't think it's going to happen, but I do like that, and it makes sense. I've been watching for a couple of years now, watching the Steelers, waiting for them to kind of falter and maybe have a similar kind of separation with Mike Tomlin and the Steelers. It just hasn't happened. He's too good. They keep winning. I mean, that's somebody that I would like to have here. Sean Payton is somebody else I would love to have here. And it's not like they haven't had these coach trade, situations in the past. So it's not wildly unheard of. I mean, it's something that, very out there on the periphery, but it could happen. I'm down with it. Obviously, I would love for that. I mean, that would save the franchise. That'd be a franchise saving move. I don't know that they have. I don't know that they would pull the trigger on something like that, as much as we would love to see it happen. It's fun to talk about. I love that thought. I'll go to sleep thinking about that tonight, and I'll feel real good.
It's thoughts like that that get you through a 4-8 season, isn't it? I mean, it's just that little bit of that hope again. But I mean, I'm with you. I didn't. If you were to say to me how much money would you like to put on that happening, I would say $0.
Right.
But it's just like I say, it's one of those things.
You can put something on it.
If it comes off, exactly. It's a good point.
£10. Come on.
Yeah, stick a 10. Why not? Why not? Do you know, here's I mean, this is the thing. Sometimes there's those kind of things. There was a week 17 end of the regular season last year. 8 players to score a touchdown in the early window and the late window, and 7 scored touchdowns very, very quickly in their games. And there's the 8th one. It was Josh Jacobs. And I'm watching the game, and there was $2,000 on this. It was the odds were ridiculous.
Yeah,
and I'd given up because I think the Raiders were so far ahead in the game, they weren't going to have a rushing touchdown. It just wasn't going to happen. And then Josh Jacobs just broke off a 50-yard touchdown running with about 4 minutes to go. And it's just like, thank you, Denver. I woke my children up screaming, shouting. My wife knew at that point that the money had been won. She had gone to bed. So, sometimes you've got to take a chance, haven't you?
Yeah.
So maybe $5 on it, but
let's do it.
It's not likely, but I would rather think about something like that than the prospects of Russell Wilson being traded. And look, Pete and John will always be legends in Seattle, but I do not, Matt, and I don't know how you feel about this, I do not want them going anywhere near whatever draft haul they get from a potential Russell Wilson trade and having to rebuild this team, because and you mentioned the Jamal Adams trade.
Yeah.
There's been too many moments like that over the years that you just think, I'm done. I need somebody else to have a go here.
I definitely feel that way about Pete Carroll. I don't necessarily feel that way about John Schneider. I think he's young enough. I think that without the influence of a Pete Carroll, because I don't know how much sway Pete Carroll has in those kinds of decisions on draft day, I think quite a bit. I think they've also given a lot of autonomy in previous years to a lot of other people as well, like Tom Cable and things like that. So, John Schneider, look, maybe you're able to bring in Scott McCloughan, bring him back as an advisor with draft talent evaluation, everything. I'm not ready to go there with John Schneider just yet. I think that he's done a lot of savvy things. Now he's definitely, pulled some boners here, obviously with the Jamal Adams thing, but I think that was done. That was a desperation move. I think it was done because there was here's the thing. I think that obviously they haven't drafted well, but I think two things really, really set this franchise back a lot. Number one was the Malik McDowell draft pick, which how do you know the guy is going to get in an ATV accident? And yeah, they were kind of going outside their MO with the kinds of drafts that they've had and the kinds of, character guys that they typically draft with that. So that was partially on them, but still, how do you know the guy's not going to play a snap again? I say not going to play a snap again. Now he's doing whatever he's doing with Cleveland, so which is doubly frustrating, but whatever. So there's that. And then the other thing is not having the foresight to read the market when it came to Frank Clark. And that's where this really the wheels really came off, because that if you have Frank Clark, you re-sign him, Jamal Adams never comes here. They don't make that trade. They're not desperate for a pass rush in what's a closing, or what was a quickly closing championship window. That's what happened. They misread the market with Frank Clark. DeMarcus Lawrence blew that market up. And all of a sudden, Clark was demanding $22 million because of what Lawrence got. So that's what threw all that off. They trade Clark, which at that point was the right decision to do, because you can't pay Frank Clark $22 million. You just can't do it. He's not that player. He's a very nice edge rusher, but he's not that player. And they had no real plan on how you replace that. So they're playing, they're bringing in veteran guys, aging guys. They don't have a lot of depth, so you've got guys who are playing late into their careers and playing more snaps than they should be in a given game. The pass rush is a huge issue, so they go out and they get Jamal Adams, like I said, in a desperation move to try and cling to the last little bit of championship caliber that this team had, and you see what's happened with that. So I see how we got here. I don't think that John Schneider is done. I would be very happy to see what a John Schneider front office looks like without the influence of Pete Carroll. And he's built a franchise once. I think he can do it again.
Very interesting. There's so many things to talk about there. With some very interesting points that you raised. I think quickly on Schneider, I worry a little bit that he, more than Carroll, was the one itching to maybe make that Wilson trade. It's just a little hunch that I've had, and I've been talking about it for a year. It was reported that he met with Ryan Pace in North Dakota ahead of Trey Lance's pro day, and then presented an offer to Carroll, and Carroll turned it down. And I think if Schneider was saying, we cannot, I'm not in no interest, I think he's just telling Carroll, I'm not going there to meet with Ryan Pace. I don't know. Maybe Carroll sends him down there. I don't know. I've got the sense that Schneider is done with Mark Rodgers, and that relationship is broken. So I wonder if Wilson and Schneider can coexist, but we'll see. I mean, it might be that they're just told to get on with it. And right. If Schneider can deliver a top coach, a top offensive-minded coach that Wilson really believes in, then I'm sure that bridges can be built. I think with and I really want to talk about Jamal Adams, because you and I share strong opinions on Jamal Adams.
We sure do. And look how things turned out.
I know exactly. I know some receipts need to be brought up. But before that, it's really interesting. See, the thing with the McDowell pick is that is very frustrating. It didn't work. I don't have an issue with that so much, because I think they went for the home run on a guy who was a top 10 pick, and they had a great roster and they went for it and it didn't work out. And I kind of think, well, it's really unfortunate that if that accident never happens, who knows? He could have been the next Calais Campbell. So I'm never. My big issue is some of what you've talked about. It's the reset. It's how I think they went against sort of their own. They've got real clarity on what they want to be, and then they went against it. So they have a very specific type of running back, and those types of running backs were available in 2018. They take Rashad Penny, who is not the kind of running back they go for. And it's been long reported since, people have said explicitly that they kick themselves every day in that front office for not taking Nick Chubb, who was the prototype for a Seahawks running back. And they took Rashad Penny instead. The rest is history. And then the following year, you mentioned with Frank Clark, I don't know if you can remember, Matt, before all of that happened, the Minnesota Vikings got ahead of the game when they re-signed Danielle Hunter. They gave him a contract which was good
Yeah.
and was more based on the potential of what he could become than what he was. But
I
they
remember
got
that
ahead of
deal.
the
I
game.
remember saying, who the hell's Daniil Hunter?
But then they got terrific value because they
Absolutely
anticipated what he was going to become. And the
Mm-hmm.
Seahawks didn't do that with Frank Clark. They let him go into the final year before they would have to negotiate with him. Let him get the 13.5 sacks. Let DeMarcus Lawrence get his deal first. They backed themselves into a corner. They had to trade him. But then having traded him, they could have still salvaged that. That was a defensive line draft with a lot of players. And I know for a fact that they really liked Rashawn Gary, who ended up in Green Bay, who's not had a great career, to be perfectly honest. But they also love Brian Burns, who is a captain in Carolina and is one of their building blocks that Rule's going to try and build around in Carolina. They had 2 first-round picks, and they just watched both of those guys leave the board.
Yeah.
And it's just go and get Brian Burns. And you sit there at 21 as it was, and your guys have gone, and your instant reaction is, we'll trade down. We'll trade down. I know they still like Jonathan Abram, and they were going to take him the safety. They trade down. Abram comes off the board. Then they're left in a situation where they've got back-to-back picks in the first round, and they don't want to spend them. They don't want to spend them. So they take LJ Collier, and then they deliver a press conference after that first day of the draft where it looked as if someone had just told them that their holidays have been cancelled. Like that they've got a lump of coal in their stocking. That's what they looked like after that press conference on that first day, because it had gone completely wrong. So they traded Clark. They had a week to prepare for the draft afterwards, and they got it so wrong. And they've gone from in 2018 having Reed and Clark, and it's like, how do you build on that to have a great D-line? So you've not got Clark, and now you've not got anybody else, and you're in desperation mode. And then you're doing what they've done for the last few years. You get Jadeveon Clowney before that season starts, but he's only on a rental. And then you say that Clowney is your priority after the season finishes, but you don't get that done, and you don't get anything else done. And it's Bruce Irvin, and it's Benson Mayowa, and then it's trading up for a guy who wasn't going to be able to play in his first year. Darrell Taylor looks good, but that's just the fact of what he was. That was a desperation move. And then it's the Jamal Adams trade, which is, we will, let's move on to that. It just gets worse and worse and worse, Matt. And the only thing that I can think that this could become even worse now is if this shoulder injury is so bad that he never plays for the Seahawks again, or if he does, he just injures it again at some point next season.
He'll play again. He'll play his normal level, which is he's a really good athlete that plays, a few different positions on your defense. And I love it when he's explosive, and he can be explosive, and he can do those kinds of things. It just happens it happens sporadically. You can't really plan on it. And then you have to rework how your entire defense works to make him work. And so I think that's kind of where we thought, he's what I thought you and I thought he would be. Look, even if he was a perennial Pro Bowl type safety, I think you and I still would have seen it as probably a mistake, but it's still palatable because he's making big plays for you. I mean, the last 5 weeks of his season this year, he played much better than we had seen him play the first half of the year. So I felt great about it, but I was like, well, at least he's playing pretty well. But going forward, now he's got a 4-year deal that's going to pay him more than any safety's ever made in this league. And, it pays him right on the same tier as Bobby Wagner is going to be making in his last year. So it's all backwards. If you're in a rebuild, it's something that it's a pill you swallow if you're on the brink and you're saying, well, we're fighting for a championship right now and we'll deal with it later. We'll deal with whatever happens later. They're nowhere near that. And, the reason why there's so much parity in the NFL and the reason why franchises can recover quickly if they have the right quarterback and the right staff in place, coaching staff, is because, hey, if you have a down year like this, you have the ability to recover with a top 10 draft pick. And they don't have that ability. The New York Jets have that ability. So just all of it is a huge dumpster fire organizationally in terms of how you're going to get back now. So I don't know. There's a lot of, and maybe, I don't know, maybe that means you tear it all down. I don't think that you necessarily have to, but I certainly would understand if Jody Allen came out of a room one day here in late January and just said, "Let's burn it all to the ground and start over again." Yeah.
The thing is, Matt, is what are the building blocks? How many guys on this roster right now, as you look at it, can you say, whether it's Carroll or Schneider and another coach, or a new coach and a new GM, who are you looking at and going, okay, that's the foundation for my next contender?
Here's the problem is when you build a franchise, that's what they're at. They're rebuilding. When you build a franchise, you do it from the inside out. You do it, you build the interior, you get strong in the trenches, you build a foundation. That's a great word you used. And then you worry about the outside stuff. Those skill players and everything, they come filter in, you draft them, you sign them, whatever you got to do. All of their money, their long-term money is tied up, quarterback aside for a moment, in a wide receiver and a safety. And going to be here pretty soon, another wide receiver when they sign DK Metcalf, and another safety when they sign Quandre Diggs. It's completely backwards to where you want to be when you're going to build a franchise. So there's a lot of fixing that needs to be done. It happened fast. And, I think that some people, I think you and I maybe could see the writing on the wall that this was a possibility. There are a lot of warts that Russell Wilson's been able to cover up over the last few years. But Russell Wilson is older, and Russell Wilson obviously this year was playing through an injury as well. He wasn't, whatever reason you want to give, new offense that is not settled into, whatever it is, Russell Wilson this year could not make up for all those warts, and that's how everything else now plays a factor in this team that, in all likelihood is going to finish in the bottom quarter of the NFL this year.
I can see this. You can see this, Matt. I don't understand why any team, whether that's GM, head coach, or a head coach who's the vice president of football operations, wouldn't think, do you know what? If nothing else, my team's going to go out there having invested in the trenches. If there's one thing that our identity is that we're going to go out there and we're going to kick your ass up front in the trenches. And the Seahawks have really not done enough to stick to that kind of a plan. They've gone the opposite way, and yet the way that they want to play, you would say that the main thing that they absolutely need is to be good O-line, D-line.
They backed themselves into that corner we talked about with Frank Clark. They had talent there. They had talent in Jaron Reed, and they pissed him away. And they haven't invested in the offensive line since Russell Wilson, since they won the Super Bowl. They haven't invested properly, I should say, in the offensive line. They took a couple swings at it, but they got it wrong. So, no, I mean, it's all wrong. It's all wrong for where they are, for looking at, well, how do we get out of this and how do we build back up to a championship contender? And it sounds like, look, fans know me and people around here know me and how optimistic I usually am. And look, I'm obviously a giant fan of this franchise as you are. And I don't like saying these things. I don't like thinking these things. I don't like this negative outlook on the Seahawks, but that's where we're at right now with the Seattle Seahawks franchise. So there's no quick fix. There's only, it's not going to get better this next year because you don't have a first round pick to plug in there. You can start it this year. Look, and this is the light at the end of the tunnel, whether it's John Schneider doing it or whatever it is. If you make a couple key decisions correctly in this league, you can rebuild in 2 years if you have the right quarterback.
Yeah.
So I still think, and a lot of people probably at this point disagree with me because of the last 16, 17, 18 games as a whole of Russell Wilson's career, I think it all starts with making sure you still have the quarterback. Make sure Russell Wilson stays here.
Yep.
That's got to be step one. The rest of it you can figure out and make good decisions, and whether it's GMs, head coach, and things are, but make sure you have that, because that is the hardest part to assemble. And that's the thing that everybody wants and covets. You got to have that quarterback. After that, if you have the quarterback, you can rebuild in 2 years in this league between the draft, free agency, trade, all that. You can make it work. And there's plenty of franchises that have. Got to have the quarterback. And we've seen too many franchises who have given up on a quarterback or have said, okay, well, we'll get the next one. And it never comes. It took Cleveland 30 years to find a quarterback. And we still don't know that they necessarily have it. I like Baker Mayfield. I don't know that he's necessarily the guy that's going to take them to the next level. So it's the hardest thing in sports to find. And once you have that, you hang on to it. And I think that it can start right there with the rebuild.
Completely agree. I think if you give Russell Wilson a really good O-line, a running game, and you have a pass rush, everything else will take care of itself.
Yeah, I think so. It's not, we're not reinventing the wheel here. It's still football. Now, the game has changed a little bit. It's more of an aerial game and things like that. But yeah, you protect your quarterback, be able to run the football so you can have balance and yeah, have a pass rush and just kind of let the chips fall where they may. And I think you'll have a playoff team that finds itself. You don't have to be the most dominant team in the league to win a Super Bowl or to get to the Super Bowl. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers last year were not the best team in the league, year from the start of the year to the end of it. But they pulled it together when it mattered. They had elite quarterback play in the playoffs, and they figured it out. You don't have to dominate in this league to win a Super Bowl. You just have to go on a 3-game winning streak in the playoffs. But you got to get there, and you have to have a quarterback. And you have to be able to play some kind of defense, and you got to protect the quarterback.
3 more topics I want to bring up, and the first one is some of the people are talking about in the comment section, and I want to put this to you because as we're talking here, if Russell Wilson stays, they don't have a first-round pick. They may well have a high second-round pick. They're coming to an off-season where they will need to have a conversation with DK Metcalf about his contract. DeAndre Hopkins' contract in Arizona is worth $28 million a year. The top receivers behind Nuke Hopkins are earning between $20 and $28 million a year. So DK Metcalf is going to, quite rightly, ask for that kind of money and should expect to receive that kind of money because that is where the market is with receivers. So, do the Seahawks commit that much money to DK Metcalf, having already paid Tyler Lockett handsomely and having drafted D. Eskridge in the second round this year? Do they commit that kind of money to DK Metcalf? Or should they try and initiate a Jamal Adams style trade and then reinvest that money and those picks in the trenches? What do you think?
I love DK Metcalf so much. I freaked out. I ran up and down the hall when they drafted him. I was doing as much of a cartwheel as I can do at my size. I was doing, well, I guess it was more mental cartwheels, but if I could do a cartwheel, I was doing cartwheels. I love everything about DK Metcalf. His size, his speed, his attitude. I love every personal foul he gets. I don't care. I love every fight he gets into. I don't care.
Yeah, I'm with you.
You can't give him that contract. You cannot give him that contract. You got to trade him. And this is not, this is because of where they're at as an organization. It's just, you're not in a place where you can build that way right now. And I'm all about building around the quarterback. I'm all about building around Russell Wilson and giving him the most talent that you can. I think with what Tyler Lockett's contract is, unless the only way you do it is if you say, I'm punting on 2022 completely. I'm trading Tyler Lockett, and I know what kind of cap hit that is, and it's massive.
Big.
It's massive. But I'm trading Tyler Lockett. You have to pick one or the other. You're gonna have Lockett or Metcalf. Lockett's older, he's less physical. I'd rather have Metcalf, but they made a deal with Lockett. So if you put on 2022 and say I'm trading Lockett, you get a first round pick back. That'll help you right now. Get that first round pick. The money's off the books for 2023, and you go from there. I don't think you're gonna. There's no way that's going to happen.
No.
But in my brain, that's how you keep DK Metcalf. But you can't have them both. So you got to pick.
It's hard though, isn't it, Matt? Because I'm with you. the last thing you want to do is keep trading away the really good players that you actually hit on. So they hit on Frank Clark. He is terrific. And then you trade him away. And then you select DK Metcalf the year that you trade Frank Clark. And then you get to the point where you have to pay him and you trade him away. Meanwhile, you're paying people like Jamal Adams $17.5 million a year, having invested so much in him. That's bad money after a bad trade. DK Metcalf should technically be good money after a good decision to draft him. But I tend to lean where you're coming from here, especially because it's bad enough watching the games this year where you think, there's a minute left in the Washington game and he's not had a catch. And you think, imagine this being the case when he's earning $25 million a year. That's the problem. Like that cannot be. So unless, now it's different, isn't it? If Carroll goes, they bring in some offensive guru who can then turn DK Metcalf into the best receiver in the NFL and really open and unlock the offense, changes it, doesn't it? But if there is some degree of status quo maintained here, they just cannot justify it, can they? And they've got to get better in the trenches. The only pathway to this team being really good again is to invest in that O-line and D-line. And right now, they're not going to have the maximum opportunity to do that because of their lack of draft stock in this draft, which is a draft. It's not a particularly great draft up top, Matt. What it does have, it has some intriguing offensive and defensive linemen that you would like to tap into that. And if you get to save some money somewhere, personally, I would move on from Bobby Wagner. I don't think he's worth $20 million next year. I'm not sure I would pay DK $25 million. If you've got that kind of money, you can invest in veteran linemen and you can use your draft stock to really bolster your lines.
No, I think we're kind of on the same page. I would move on from Bobby Wagner. I guess I would trade DK Metcalf. I've said before I would trade Tyler Lockett, and if we're punting on 2022, then I would. And just take that massive cap hit, and I mean massive cap hit. I would do that if it meant hanging on to DK Metcalf, and you have Russell Wilson, DK Metcalf, and Jamal Adams is really your big money commitments. Then you have a draft pick from the Tyler Lockett trade to actually draft somebody worthwhile up front, and you start rebuilding there. You start rebuilding in the trenches. That's what I would kind of do. Now, there's a reason why I'm not a general manager in the NFL, because taking on that kind of cap hit for a Tyler Lockett trade would be ludicrous, and there's not a GM in football that would do it. So, but I think that this franchise right now, obviously there are a lot of tough decisions that have to be made and uncomfortable decisions that have to be made, and it's about how fast you can turn around. Can you hang on to Russell Wilson, and then where do you go from there? Yeah, build around him, build a line in front of him, and a line on the other side that's gonna stop somebody, and you've got a quarterback that can lead you to great places. And I think that he can do that without a DK Metcalf, because he's done it before without DK Metcalf. So as much as I'm telling you, I love DK Metcalf, that right now it's a luxury you can't afford.
Yeah.
And if you were in a championship window, absolutely you could, but that's not where they're at right now.
No, I'm wondering and I think that there's probably teams with young quarterbacks who are not paying big salaries to quarterbacks who can probably think, I can take on a huge salary hit for DK Metcalf to give them the kind of weapon that they need. And, just a team that springs to mind when you say something like that is Zach Wilson and the Jets. And you just wonder if there's a way of somehow getting your pick back. I don't know, but that's maybe something we can think about down the line.
It's gone. It's gone.
It's gone.
Goodbye.
Yeah.
I was on the golf course. I was on the third tee at the fourth tee at Meadow Park Golf Course in Tacoma, Washington. I got the alert. We traded for Jamal Adams, and I got the second alert, which was what we gave away from Jamal Adams. And I said, this is when the championship window for this team died, right here.
Somehow my reaction was even stronger than that. So I was sat right here, and I can remember my wife was sat on the couch across from us, and I remember seeing the tweet saying the Seahawks training for Jamal Adams. I was like, wow, interesting. This is unexpected. And then seeing what the compensation was, and just letting out this enormous blood-curdling shout, and then spending the next hour ranting at my wife, who's not interested in football, about about why it was a disaster. And really, really sad. I mean, that Atlanta game, I was thinking, oh, maybe I'll be wrong about that. That first game.
Yeah,
maybe I've got this completely wrong.
That was fun.
Then, no, that was a one-off. The other side, I mean, we touched it briefly. I just want to, we'll quickly go back to it, and then I've got one final thing to ask you. So, Bobby Wagner's performance, another stream accused me of being an arsehole for questioning Bobby Wagner's, it's not so much his effort, but there was a few plays, and Jamal Adams has shown this as well, where Bobby Wagner appears to be hesitant to initiate contact. And I've gone through and I've watched, and I never want to, and the accusation is you should never criticize players who play this game for showing a lack of effort. To which my point is what is that ever? Is it possible to say that a player, you can't question his effort 95% of the time, but here's a collection of plays that you may be surprised to see. And I don't even know if effort's the right way to describe it. Maybe it's just a case of here's a player who is the wrong side of 30 now, who has had the two big contracts in his career. And I don't know. I have no idea how to describe this sufficiently that would avoid any kind of criticism. But all I can say is that I've watched the All-22 on numerous games this season, specifically to watch Wagner. And I was really surprised, Matt, by what I saw. I didn't expect to see a lot of these plays, as many of these plays as I did. I'm not saying that Bobby Wagner is a bad player in the slightest, but I did not expect to see things like a screen pass against Green Bay, and he's basically just following the ball carrier down the field, not engaging in that. Just go and attack the ball carrier, engage the block, shed it, and get to the ball. He's just standing there and watching it go along, and he's almost keeping out of the play. There's a play against Jacksonville where he's watching the potential boot from Trevor Lawrence. It's a handoff to the running back instead. The running back comes across, a lineman peels out to the second level and engages Wagner. And he can see, because he's peeking at the running back, and he can see and he's got a lane to the running back, and he doesn't go and shoot that lane and go and get the running back. He stands there in front of the guard, kind of hesitant. And perhaps that's the best way of describing it. He's really hesitant on some plays. And the more I watched, the more surprised I was. And people talk about how many tackles he's got. That's great. Jordan Brooks is like fourth in the league for tackles as well. Yeah. So that's just indicative of the way this season has gone, that our linebackers have got a lot of tackles.
Mm-hmm. Well, at least it's not the safeties. I remember when I think Reggie Tung led the league or led the team in tackles one year. So,
I guess what I'm coming to, Matt, is that what I'm seeing here means there is I wouldn't want them to be spending $20 million on a middle linebacker anyway, but there's absolutely no way they can justify that salary next year.
And this is why people think you're an asshole?
Yes. No, let me qualify that. This is one of the reasons.
Okay. All right. Okay. There's a list. Yeah, you're probably right. I think there's probably a number of factors. His age, a little bit. He's probably making some business decisions. He doesn't have KJ Wright out there any longer, and it probably doesn't feel the same. There's probably not that comfort level with his assignment, and that, if he sticks his nose there, that he's backed up like he was with KJ too. So I think that it all kind of plays a factor. And we talked about with DK Metcalf, and I don't know that I don't think they have the luxury of paying Bobby Wagner right now next year for that $20 million. So it's not where they're at, and so it doesn't get you anything long term. Frees up rollover cap for the following year if you move on from Bobby Wagner. And so I think that's probably what happens. You brought in Jordan Brooks to be his eventual replacement. I think Jordan Brooks has shown enough that he would be competent as a middle linebacker, and you go from there. This team has to get younger. Got to get younger. That's the other thing with a rebuild. You have to get young, especially on defense. That's what I mean. You can sign veteran offensive linemen, receivers, all that offensively, but if you want to get back to knocking guys around and fast play, you've got to get young on defense, play young guys, and they got to get back to that. And that means, and again, Bobby Wagner, he's going to be in the Ring of Honor, and he'll have his number retired. He's going to the Hall of Fame, I think. But that doesn't mean we need to carry that salary next year.
No. And you raised it earlier that you don't, you can turn around a team in 2 years. And I think that's been shown. And it's been shown by a team that's moved on from a quarterback in New England. They've really done it in one off season, because last year they didn't really do anything to turn it around. They kind of just had a year where they weren't in contention. And then this year spent big because they had the available cap space to do that. They drafted well. They've got younger and better, and they're the top team in the AFC again. Meanwhile, in Green Bay, they went from 6-10 and 6-10 to 13-3 and 13-3 by changing the coach, improving their pass rush, and getting some cornerbacks in. So, and that was by keeping Aaron Rodgers. So you can turn it around quickly, but you have to make difficult decisions. You have to be willing to make a call on, is this right for our team to be paying this guy this? Do we invest in this? Or do we trade this guy? And then when you have your resources, Matt, spend them wisely, because that's not been enough of Seattle. They've squandered resources, haven't they, over the years?
And there's a question in the chat about, did KJ cover up Bobby Wagner's inadequacies? And of course, like when it came to the secondary, there was always the debate, like, okay, well, being Earl Thomas being back there at safety, what does that do for Richard Sherman? Well, it allows him to be more aggressive. It makes up for his whatever shortcomings that he does have. Bobby Wagner doesn't have inadequacies. Bobby Wagner has been the most badass middle linebacker for a decade, and he's going to Canton because of it. I'm not saying that at all. It's not that kind of situation at all for me, but I think that having his battery mate there and KJ Wright, that they played alongside each other for 10 years, and just knew, hey, this is where he's going to be. I have my thing done, and he's going to have his thing done too. So that way, if I'm reading this wrong or something goes to hell, he's got me covered. He just doesn't have that anymore. He's played with KJ Wright almost his entire career. I think, in fact, he played with him his entire career. So to not have that there, I think that's, I'm sure it's got to be in his head.
So the final topic, and you'll like this one, Matt. I think you'll like this one. What the heck is going on at Oregon right now?
Oh, I'm gonna like this? You said I'm gonna like this? Oh my god, nothing good. I mean, there were reports today that Oregon's gonna sign Georgia's defensive coordinator to be head coach, which would be I would enjoy that. I think I would like that. God, Mario Cristobal moving on, that kind of ripped me apart, because big Oregon fan. The program is in the right trajectory, man. They're right there. They'd won the last 2 Pac-12 championships. They were in a third. They won a Rose Bowl and everything like that. They came up against a Utah squad that, it's just a bad matchup. Everything we talk about, the trenches, good Lord. So, Oregon this year was, it's important to think, we all got excited about the Ohio State, Oregon fans got excited about the Ohio State win and everything at the beginning of the year. It's important to remember too that in terms of where this this program's supposed to be, like, you're 2 years early on what's kind of where you're looking at to be the championship caliber program, with the recruits coming in, with Ty Thompson, this being a redshirt season and all that. So at quarterback, so they weren't even supposed to be there yet. And yet this is kind of where they were. So, they've got to make a quick change there and get somebody who can keep some of these recruits, bring in some of his own, and keep that momentum going, because Oregon's in a real good place right now.
Yeah. So who is it? Chip Kelly's been talked about.
Oh,
you don't want any of that?
No Chip. Do not want Chip Kelly. Look, Chip Kelly 15 years ago revolutionized offensive football in college forever, and that was great. But that was a decade and a half ago, and there's no more tricks up his sleeve. Everybody does what he did. So, I love Chip Kelly, did a lot for Oregon. No, that's not the way forward. If this rumor is true and they end up getting Georgia's DC, I think that's a step in the right direction. He's a great recruiter from everything that I've heard, and you can kind of keep that momentum going.
Here's a quick final question on this, then, Matt. How important, though, is it to get somebody who is going to be there for a long time? Because I get the sense that Lincoln Riley has made this commitment now to USC, and that he will, in 3 or 4 years, I can't see him going to the SEC or something like that. I think he's gone to USC to do a great job and see how it goes. If you bring in Georgia's defensive coordinator, is there a risk that he's going to Mario Cristobal you in 3 years' time if a job comes up in the SEC and he's going to go back there? And has that been part of the issue, that a coach comes in,
Yes.
there's always that head turning job. Do you need somebody who sees Oregon as the head turning job and wants to be there and put down some roots?
I mean, you're hopeful, you know. I mean, Willie Taggart, what happened with him? He went and turned tail and ran to Florida State. Mario Cristobal went, you know, he's got circumstances going on with his mother's health. He's also able to basically pick his own program, you know, running the program and everything. So he's program director down there in Miami too. So or athletic director is what I was trying to say. So, you know, yeah, you want to bring in somebody that's going to be there a long time. You hope that your school is that destination job. You know, I mean, it's the second highest profile job in the Pac-12. You have to ask yourself, how high profile is the Pac-12, though? You know, USC is one, Oregon's two in terms of kind of brands in the conference out here. But, you know, it's going to pale in comparison to the SEC, and it's going to stay that way until they expand the playoff. Because you've had Oregon in the Final Four the first year that it came along. You had Washington in the Final Four, and that's it since this iteration of how we choose a champion in college football has been around. Until that expands, the Pac-12 is not going to be a permanent destination for anybody because they're not competing for national titles like the SEC and the ACC and the Big Ten are. And I'm talking about for coaches, I'm talking about for players, recruits, all of it. So the Pac-12 has to raise their profile. The Pac-12 has to get better and be a destination program for players and for coaches. Until that happens, you're going to see a revolving door at Oregon. You're probably going to keep seeing it at USC too.
Yeah, I must admit, as somebody who has no horse in the race, I don't have a college team. I've no reason to. I'm not interested in the Pac. You know, if there's a Pac-12 game on, But now, you know, am I intrigued to see what Lincoln Riley does at USC? Yes.
Right.
Would I watch one of their games? Yes. Am I? You know, and if Oregon brought in a really intriguing hire, it would add to that intrigue, and I would suddenly be, hang on a minute, there's something building here. You know, there's some excitement. There's a reason to watch. I'm not sure with Washington's appointment that I feel that at all.
No.
But if Oregon do that, and if USC get Lincoln Riley, you start thinking, hang on a minute, there's something going on here.
Because they're still brands. They're still brands. I mean, and I don't know if they're going to do this. I don't think that it's going to happen. But let's say Oregon was able to convince Urban Meyer to leave Jacksonville, just leave that whole mess behind and come back to college and go to Oregon. I think you watch then. And I think it's going to take something like that to send riffles throughout this conference to the other conferences and those fan bases to watch these games that are airing, you know, starting at 10:30 p.m. on the East Coast, or good God, probably 4 a.m. for you. So
that is exactly what it is. What we have is like a slate of games, and there's always like that Pac-12 game, which is like shoot at 3 a.m. And then you have to watch it and what happens is I'll put Twitter on, I'll see someone tweeting about what's happened. It blows the whole game. I feel less motivated to watch it.
Right.
Go downstairs. It's a real issue. But I tell you what, Matt, when Oregon make their coaching decision, I'll be having a look on Twitter to see what your reaction is.
Good. I'm sure I'll have one.
There's a couple of guys that I follow that are Oregon fans, so I'll be intrigued to see whatever happens, what the reaction is there. Matt, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. Great views, great opinions. And if people want to follow you on Twitter, where do they need to go?
Just go at Matt Mikolas, Mikolas.
Fantastic. And the Seahawks are going to win this weekend?
Oh, yeah. This weekend, I don't worry about it. And then we'll see, and we'll just kind of see. And I'll just, you know, a couple of Hail Marys and a few Our Fathers. We'll see where we're at.
Does it say just above your shoulder? It says believe.
That's right. That's right. Oh, this shoulder here.
It's there.
Yeah, it's here. I got my believe sign. I got Black Santa over here. So we got it all working for us.
Hopefully, he's going to deliver an improbable playoff run.
Let's hope.
Matt, absolute pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
It's been a great time as always. Thank you.
Thank you to everybody for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, share the video around, and we'll see you after the game for the instant reaction stream. Enjoy your weekend. Good luck to the Seahawks.
Go Hawks.